AI, VR, AR. What's the difference between Degreed and Edcast? Who are the players in the LMS space? What is an LMS? When do you use it? When don't you use it? It can get overwhelming with all of those tools, but that's what our credibility is based on. That's what a stakeholder expects from us if we want them to see us as a strategic business partner.
Keith, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Glad to be here.
Firstly, how are you? It's been a while.
I'm good. I'm good. Life is good. The book's out. It's doing well. Career's good. Health is good. Everything's good.
Amazing. How's it feel that the book's out now?
You have kids, so I don't want this to be interpreted the wrong way, but this is the closest I'll have to giving birth, to creating something that lives in the world that I'm having to take care of and nurture and
Yeah,
grow.
yeah.
It feels really good to just be able to share my knowledge. I mean, I don't know if many people know this. I'm going to say it's controversial. You don't write a book to make money. You don't write a book to retire.
Not
You know,
anymore,
I,
anyway.
no, I mean, I get
Yeah.
10% is my cut of the book. So for me, it was never about making money. It was about sharing knowledge. And that's why our industry exists. So to answer your question, I'm thrilled that I can be able to share this knowledge with anyone and everyone who can
Yeah.
afford the book.
Yeah, no, no. I love your honesty, and even any of the authors I speak to, right? Back in the day, you could make money on books, but now 99% of the time it's really a passion project because you want to give something to the world. How many months pregnant were you before the book came out?
Oh my gosh, many like 16 months.
16.
16 months.
16 months. What you mentioned obviously a little bit around the inspiration behind the book, but who is this for? Tell everyone a bit more. Firstly, tell everyone the name of the book and obviously who is it for?
Yeah, it's a good place to start. So it's called the Trusted Learning
There it
Advisor.
is.
Although the name is a little bit of a misnomer because you could replace learning with talent or HR. It's not specific to one area, but the answer is it's for talent development, it's for HR, it's for learning. It's a manifesto, it's a guide, it's a toolkit, it's a motivational mentor that helps all of us to evolve from this place that we've been stuck in, which is predominantly being order takers. Somebody else in the business makes the decision on who, what, where, when, why, how a learning intervention takes place. They throw that over the wall, we catch it, and they just expect us to execute it. We're at this point where we have to evolve, or our industry really is at risk. And so this book, my intention is to help our industry evolve from being order takers to being strategic business partners, otherwise known as trusted learning advisors.
Yeah. I've heard you say this before, and I wanted to ask you a question. Do you think L&D and HR are in the same trajectory? Like, obviously, I literally started doing this when I was 17, which is like 18 years ago, and we were still talking about the seat at the table back then. I do think HR has made huge strides. Would you say the same thing for L&D? I speak to less L&D leaders than I do HR. So what do you think about the evolution of L&D?
There's been some progress for L&D, but not enough. Absolutely not enough. And part of it, if you look at other parts of the organization, let's say technology, marketing, when I go to my technology team and I ask for something, they're very quick to say no. They're very quick to say it's not our process, or it has to be approved, or there's all these channels you have to go through. And I listen, and we inherently listen. And the same if I'm putting a marketing request or even an HR request, they have processes and procedures in place that we somehow inherently follow, but we're not treated with that same respect. I can say to my stakeholder, I have a process in place. I need to do a needs analysis. I need to do this. And they'll come back and say, no, get it done. And we've inherently listened to that. If you think back to how L&D started in organizations, it was in the manufacturing revolution, industrial revolution. Managers were determining what the worker needed to do. So the manager would go to L&D and say, train the worker to move this widget here. And we would go and we'd execute that order. That mindset has continued. And I think part of it is that everybody believes they can do L&D. Everybody believes they can be a trainer because they've had some experience with education. They've been to school, so they know how this works. But there is truly a science behind what we do. There is a science of learning. So the answer to your question is, I don't think that we've evolved nearly as enough as we need to. And that's what this book is advocating for.
Yeah, you mentioned a little bit there, but why is that the case?
Couple of reasons. One, we are an inclusive industry. And what I mean by that is anybody can take a course or not take a course and suddenly say, I'm in learning and development. I'm an instructional designer. I'm a trainer. I'm a coach. It's a low barrier threshold to entry. And I say that and I call myself out because I wouldn't have this career if it wasn't low barrier to entry. If I said to you, hey, Chris, I want to join, I want to be an HR generalist. There's typically a lot of education that comes along with that. You have to understand the legality behind it in the states or the countries. You have to understand benefits. You have to understand all these different nuances, and it takes training and learning to be able to do that. If I said, "Hey, I want to be a coach or I want to be an instructional designer," like I said, I can go take a quick course on Coursera and then label myself this. When we do that, we're doing a disservice to our industry and to the roles because we're not able to deliver in the manner that our stakeholders need or our learners need because we're not truly experienced yet. We haven't built that credibility. And that's one of the big things that I think is missing within the L&D industry is taking the time to establish your credibility. So one answer to your question is that low barrier entry. I don't think we've established enough credibility.
Hmm.
Anybody can transition in, which is a value proposition, but you have to back it up with building the skills that you need.
How have you done this in your own career? For example, when you joined this organization, what are the steps that you took to establish your credibility?
That's a great question. Let me take a step back. So I would say my first 5, 10 years in the industry in general, I was an order taker. I did exactly what was needed. And then I built up some experience. I built up some credibility by understanding and having been through certain scenarios before and establishing a point of view based on my experience. Then I tried to speak up, but my stakeholders didn't necessarily want to listen. So I had to refine my skills. And the trusted learning advisor is really built on this idea of consulting skills. I'm not presenting anything that's new or revolutionary. I'm almost encouraging people to take a step back from all these shiny objects in front of us and think about, how do you build relationships? How do you build trust? How do you build credibility? Because we often want our stakeholders to trust us and respect us. But my question back to that practitioner is, what have you done to deserve it?
That's true.
Rather than just saying, yeah, I deserve this. Like, you should be treating me this way, but why? What have you done? So kind of to answer your question, in my current organization or in any organization, the first thing I do is I go in and I build a relationship with the stakeholders. I understand from their perspective. There's a tool in the book I call a commitment partner expectation charter. And that's where we sat down and we established, what does this relationship look like? What is it that you expect of me? What do I expect of you? How are you going to show up to this relationship? I think about it this way. Imagine if we all had warning labels that we came with, like Chris is allergic to peanuts or Keith hates
I
chocolate
am actually
or
allergic to peanuts as well, by the way. So that's a fun.
that was a great
That's a
guess.
good guess.
So, I mean, these are all kind of, basic ideas. But for me, I'll give you an example. I hate the phone. My phone ringer is never, ever turned on. But if you text me or you email me, I'll respond in 3 to 5 minutes. You should know that as my stakeholder. Because if you don't, you may be calling me. I had an example with a stakeholder once who called me for 3 or 4 days. I didn't pick up because I didn't hear it ring, and he didn't leave a voicemail. And so I saw the missed calls, but I saw no voicemail. And I was like, he didn't need to reach me. Meanwhile, when I did see him in the office a couple of days later, he went off on me. Now, am I not important enough for you to pick up the phone? I was like, whoa, I'm sorry. You didn't leave a voicemail. Well, I don't leave voicemails. Well, neither one of us knew this about each other. So if we had spent the time to develop the understanding of each other at the beginning, we would have a stronger relationship. So building trust, building relationships, building credibility.
Love that, and I love the fact that you shared the simple tool in the book. Did you share some questions in there as well to
Oh,
ask?
absolutely. There's a whole appendix of questions on when you're first starting with your relationship with your stakeholder, but also when that order comes in. Because in the book I talk about, there's a difference between being an order taker
Mm.
and taking the order.
Okay.
We should always take the order. I'm not advocating that when your stakeholder comes to you, you push back and you don't take the order. Absolutely not. We take the order. We have to be in the game. We have to be in the discussion. But once you take the order, Your next step is what determines whether you're an order taker or a trusted learning advisor. For example, I hear a lot in the industry people saying, well, we should push back. If we think that what they're telling us to do is not the right thing, we should say no. I don't agree with that. I think there's a couple of things you have to think about. One, have you just established a relationship? Is this brand new with your stakeholder? Because
Yeah,
if you
it
come
makes a
out of the
big
gate,
difference. Yeah. No, makes a,
absolutely. If you
yeah.
come out of the gate like, no, 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 that's it. You've shut that door. They now see you as an order taker, not a business partner. So, question one, is this a brand new relationship? Question two, is there a fire? When there's a fire, if your house is on fire, you're not going to stand back and say, well, I wonder what that problem was. I wonder, did I leave the stove on? Is it arson? Is it electrical? No, you get buckets, you get everything you can, and you put the fire out. Then you do your analysis afterwards. And so we often forget that. And I think we want to push back immediately, but we've got to figure out, is there a fire that we've got to react to? And maybe this time, yeah, we do the thing that we don't maybe agree with, but it helps our stakeholder at that moment. We can coach them and guide them afterwards. At the end of the day, our job, and not just me, you as well in HR, talent development, is to make our stakeholders the hero of their own story. And what I mean by that is sometimes our stakeholders are also order takers. So we're trying to push back on this person that's given us this order, but somebody told somebody, and they're now telling us. And we're responding, oh, we got to do a needs analysis. We need 18 weeks to be able to do this. I need more money, more resources. And they're like, hey, I'm just the middle person here. The order was given to me. Or you got to think about, is this a brand new relationship? Is there a fire? And is your stakeholder also in the position of being an order taker? And when you think about those three things, that will help you from being an order taker to taking the order.
How do you then take that conversation from there? What steps need to take place?
To be transparent, first of all, it takes time. This is not something that happens overnight. And this is something that I consider a continuum. It is a journey. It's not a destination, to be cliche, bumper sticker, but it's true because you don't get to qualify yourself as being a trusted learning advisor, just like a leader. I can't call myself a leader. The question of whether or not I'm a leader is anyone willing to be led by me?
Mm.
And the same thing for being a trusted learning advisor. Does my business partner treat me like and acknowledge me as a trusted learning advisor, as a strategic business partner? Because if they don't, no matter how great I think I am, I'm not a trusted learning advisor yet because I need them to see me that way. So you need to understand from their perspective, what does that look like? What does success look like? What do those goals look like for them? Additionally, ask them point blank, where do they see you on the trajectory of order taker to strategic business
Wow.
partner?
What
Every
are
six
people's
months. I
reaction?
mean,
What are people's reactions when you first ask them that question?
a lot of times it starts off with, no, you're more down here as an order taker. And that's fine.
Wow.
If that's how they view me, then that tells me, okay, I've got a very high trajectory here to
At
change
least you know, right?
that,
Like at least is that would you rather not know and just like wander in the
yeah.
dark, right? Like,
Well, and there's some basic ways that you can know without asking to. Do they shut you out? Do they bring you into the conversation before the order, or do they just
um,
send you that order? Like, how soon in
yeah.
the process of the problem being identified do they talk to you? Because if they're talking to you not at all and they're just giving you that order, you're not a trusted learning advisor. The other question you have to ask yourself is, are you truly embedded in the business? Order takers tend to think of themselves as a separate entity. L&D's over here, HR's over here. I see us as being successful when we are embedded in the organization holistically. And there's so many value propositions that come from that. It's like systems thinking. We can identify this business unit has a problem similar to this one, and we can connect them, even if it's not a learning and development problem. So you've got to be embedded in the business and using their language. We often use our own L&D speak, our own acronyms, LMS, LXP, MOOC, Kirkpatrick, level 3. Our stakeholders don't care
They don't
about
care
any of
about it. It's not
that.
aligned to any of their
No,
goals. Oh,
nope.
yeah.
And it's not their responsibility, but it is our responsibility to understand their language. And so here's something that many people don't do or think about. Ask for an acronyms guide. Ask for a definitions guide. If those don't exist, then get a hold of maybe the last 3 or 5 PowerPoint decks that they've put together that talk about their mission, their vision, their values, their strategies. That becomes your language. Pull the keywords from there and start using it in your discussions with them that starts to change their mindset of seeing you as an order taker versus their equal or their business partner.
It's so interesting. 'Cause I was speaking to a CHRO recently who joined the business, and she was about a year in, and I was like, "How are you getting on with the transformation, etc.?" And she was like, "I haven't even started," and I was like, "What?" She was like, "Yeah, well, I spent the first year getting to know all of the stakeholders and everything you just mentioned, right? Really understanding what drives them, what motivates them." She flew all over the world to meet them more one to one, sit down, have a similar conversation, point blank ask them exactly how she would like best to work with together, and then and only and also, but obviously, of course, still delivering on day-to-day objectives, etc., and delivering.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that she did. She said to me that was one of the things I did really badly early in her career. That she'd come into organizations and immediately try and make change without building those relationships, and it was a disaster. basically. So I was like, wow. So you spent a whole year talking about time, right? Before you've even made it, like, not made a decision, but really tried to bring around huge change
Yeah.
and transformation. I was like, wow.
You have to.
Yeah.
Because if when you come out of the gate hot like that, you're burning those bridges. You're the new person that's there. So
Mm.
establishing your credibility is based on those relationships as well. Because, like a doctor, you walk into a doctor's office and you look on the wall and you're like looking for their credentials, or you go to Google and you're looking how many reviews do they have. We don't necessarily have that same luxury, I guess, unless I want to print out my my degree. Although I do recommend, though, L&D practitioners share your credentials with your stakeholders so that they know. But the other thing too, I would say, yes, I love what she did in terms of spending a year on building those relationships. Qualitative research is also a fantastic tool, whether you call it empathy research for design thinking, understanding, or qualitative research. But I like to spend time too with frontline workers, not just my stakeholders and leaders, because that's where the real rich
Yeah,
data
she also
is.
did
That's
that.
where
Yeah.
all.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, excellent,
Yeah, she
excellent.
mentioned like she was also taking the opportunity to get to know the business, the frontline workers, also the different cultures that existed across the
Mm-hmm.
world in different segments, right? So she's kind of top down all the way through, really spending the day with people on the front line. To your point,
Yeah.
and understanding from both sides. So yeah, great advice. You mentioned, I was surprised you mentioned showed him your qualifications though. I didn't really think that would be something of interest or value.
I send my CV to a new stakeholder. I'll send them
Oh
a
really?
CV.
If you got a meeting set
Yeah, I'll
up, right? For
send,
example.
I usually include 5 articles that I've published, over the last year or two that I think would be relevant and valuable to them
Interesting.
so that they can see out of the gate, I have credibility, I have experience. Otherwise, if you don't do that, how are they going to know that? You're just assuming that people know your
Or
background
you
and your
spend a lot of your
credibility.
conversation having to do that when you don't want
Hmm.
to have to spend half your time meeting someone. Hey, this is why you should listen to me.
Yeah.
This is who I am. Because I was going to ask you, one of the questions I was going to ask is how do you convince stakeholders of the value of L&D? Because yes, there's research, there's articles, there's tons of data out there, but how do you specifically?
So that's a really good question and not an easy and quick one. I would say, in short, um, first it's about the stakeholder. What's important to them? How are you meeting their needs? I use qualitative data as well as quantitative, although I tell you I'm more of a fan of qualitative data, the stories about the impact that we've had and the value that we bring. Because ultimately that's why we exist. We want to drive value for the organization, which happens to be through our talent. I will share every 6 months, maybe sometimes 3 months, but at least every 6 months, a report with my stakeholder about our successes. However, here's the nuance between what I do and what I think other people do. They typically share it out. They'll email it and just say, "Hey, here's our successes from the last 6 months." I sit down with my stakeholder and have a discussion on whether or not they agree that these qualify as successes. Because I don't want to be telling them what I think is a success for them to read it and not agree with me, because
Mm.
ultimately I'm supporting them. And so I found that when I switched that approach to discussing it and having them give feedback and giving their input too on maybe other things that they found to be successful.
Is that from the beginning as well? So like kind of it's like you're almost setting. By the way, this is where we are, and when we have this conversation 6 months from now, we agree this is what success looks like, or you're doing it after.
Both. So I do it
Okay.
at the beginning. We talk about the business partner expectation charter. So we talk about
Oh, it's in
what are
there.
our
Great.
successes exactly, what our successes look like, and then we're reviewing that on a reoccurring basis. But where we're discussing it and agreeing it, not me reporting out.
Yeah.
Because I used to just email it out. I put it in a PowerPoint deck, be like, hey, here's our successes in the last 6 months, send it out.
No one
And never got any
cares.
feedback.
Yeah.
Right.
No one
But when you
cares.
sit down and discuss it, they can tell you whether or not they agree with that. The other thing we'll do is we'll then turn that into a white paper or an article, and we'll publish that so that others can learn from that as well. But the value proposition is never easy, and I would say that it is contextualized to your organization, because what worked or was valuable at GM is not the same way I would measure value at Archwell, is not the same way I'd measure it at HSBC. And I think a lot of times L&D looks for this generalized solution, like, Philip's ROI model we should always be using, or Kirkpatrick's model we should be using. I completely disagree that it's a certain model. It's contextualized to the organization. What do we consider valuable or success with my stakeholders? But don't just stop there. Look at other stakeholders that you don't have a relationship with, like the CFO. I'm a huge advocate of building a relationship with the CFO because their role is the same as ours, which is to create value for every business unit in the organization. And what happens is they're the ones that report out on revenue, value, et cetera. And so we run these ROI numbers or reports, and we send it out, and then everyone looks at that and they say, that's not ROI because I can't report out on this. This
That's a
is not
cost.
truly a return on
Mm.
investment. Exactly. So what if we took a step back to figure out what would the CFO consider to be value and how can we articulate that? Kind of in summary, it's less about what we think is L&D and it's more about what do our stakeholders believe is valuable and how do we help them achieve that value proposition?
Interesting. What would you say is the main reason that L&D hasn't evolved as quickly or innovated?
A couple of reasons. One, our stakeholders. Our stakeholders want us to be order takers. And we can come back to this in a minute with AI because AI is now the true order taker. And so to me, that's why we have to evolve fast now because we've got a competitive threat. If they want an order taker, just go to ChatGPT. It will create that sales training for you and it won't ask any questions. It won't ask for more budget.
now,
Not
now
wanting
you are the
to.
strategic advisor, right? Similar to with HR, right? A lot of the manual process of HR has now been automated with AI and technology. So now you have to become that strategic HR business partner. That's your value now that you're bringing to the organization. Less order taking.
Absolutely. Now, but the problem is not all of us are there to be that strategic business partner. That's why they need to read the
That's
trusted
why they
value
made the book. Yeah,
advisor.
yeah. So from that point, then,
to,
how do we move from being reactive to proactive?
so it starts with recognizing taking the order is a way to get us in the room to have a conversation. One strategic strategy that I love is I've heard for so many years, if I only had a seat at the table, if I could just get at the
Yeah,
seat
yeah,
at the table,
yeah.
I will have value and a voice. Stop trying to get a seat at the table and build your own table and invite people to come sit with you. So that's one of the best ways that we can move from being reactive to proactive is taking control over the conversation. So I know that that statement sounds ethereal, like a bumper sticker, build your own table.
No, I've
So
heard that a
here's
lot.
what
And
I,
yeah, like you like proactively reach out to the CFO.
but I'll give you another example, like skills. We're all talking about skills, or we should be. Take control over that conversation, brand it, create a skills advisory council, a skills advisory committee, whatever the vocabulary is for your organization. But you take control over that conversation. You invite the people to the discussion. You're the one creating the agenda, the guest list. You're the one doing the research. McKinsey Global Institute, World Economic Forum, Deloitte, all this rich research is free and it's available on skills. You bring that to the conversation. You invite a third-party practitioner to the conversation. So it becomes less about your voice. And that's one of the best practices that I can recommend is we often, I'm the expert, so I want people to listen to me. Oftentimes I find that people don't want to hear my voice because they're quick to say, you don't know my business. You're just L&D. So when I can bring in third-party research, internal qualitative research, and a third party external practitioner who is repeating the same thing I'm hearing, when our stakeholders hear it from somebody else and they hear all that data, then it starts to truly sink in. And so it's a great workaround when you're getting that, hitting that wall in terms of someone not wanting to listen to you. When I say build your own table, Skills Advisory Committee is one of those examples where you invite these groups of people and you're curating, facilitating, you're the orchestrator of that conversation. And that starts to help them see you differently and also help you move from being reactive to proactive.
I suppose it also allows them to come to the realization themselves of the value, if that makes sense. So rather than you being like, this is what I think and the way we should do it, kind of they like through the education, through the meetings, through the research, all of those touch points that you're talking about, they're
Yeah.
understanding, this is what this means for me.
Yep. You're leading them to
Yeah,
that
yes. Yeah.
rather than trying to, shout like, this is my idea. It's, it's
Yeah.
mine, mine, mine. And that goes back to the earlier point of our job is to make our stakeholders the hero of their story,
Yeah.
not to try and make L&D look good. And I think so many times we get frustrated because it's like, I'm not getting any credit for this. Our team did all of that. It's implicit. When we make our stakeholders successful, it's implicit that we're the ones that are supporting them because we're the ones that have helped them. It will come out eventually. We don't need to have the floor and be able to try and raise awareness that, we're so great, we're so great. When we've made them look good, they remember that and they're going to keep engaging with us.
How do you look at like delivering on the day to day whilst being present and educating yourself around all of these new shiny objects that are coming towards you?
So a trusted learning advisor has the biggest toolkit possible. And it doesn't mean that we're experts in all of those tools. We're not know-it-alls, we're learn-it-alls. So we need to have an understanding of all of them. AI, VR, AR, what's the difference between Degreed and EdCast? Who are the players in the LMS space? What is an LMS? When do you use it? When don't you use it? It can get overwhelming with all of those tools, but that's what our credibility is based on. That's what a stakeholder expects from us if we want them to see us as a strategic business partner, to have all of this awareness and understanding. So to answer your question, I would say every day I am spending, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes at least, if not also on the weekends and at nights, to get experience in these other areas because they expect it. They come to me all the time. Oh, I want VR. Well, why? Do you even know? Do
Don't
you know
even know
what
why.
that means? Right. Well, it's kind of cool. It's shiny. And for 10 years, VR was going to
Yeah, I
revolutionize
remember.
L&D and change the space. And then it
Yeah.
was like MOOCs are going to disrupt college universities. And now we have a true disruptor, which is AI. We have to become subject matter experts or at least deeply aware of AI. The difference between AI and VR is the accessibility. VR, first of all, it's extremely cost prohibitive to build a VR course. Then you have to have the equipment to go along with it. AI is now a part of our life, and there is no future. There's no version of the future that exists without AI. And the fact that it's available universally means that we've got to catch up and be more familiar with it than our stakeholders because they're playing with it as well. And they're pretty quickly going to figure out, as I said, like, oh, you can do some really quick, easy things, from an L&D perspective. So why do I need my L&D team? So we have to be that strategic business partner to help demonstrate to them why they do need us. And one of those reasons is understanding AI, understanding how it's going to impact the roles in our organization. Because every leader right now is asking themselves the same question. How can I use AI to increase my revenue, increase my effectiveness and efficiency, and decrease my costs, which basically means my resources? How can I get rid of people to do what I can do better and faster and cheaper? And AI is going to absolutely disrupt a number of jobs, whether it destroys jobs, changes jobs, or creates new jobs. All three of those is the opportunity for L&D to rise up to the occasion and prepare the workforce, prepare the talent that's going to be impacted. But we can't do that if we're not credible and have the expertise to be able to do that.
Really, one of the things I've been taking away from this conversation is it's an incredible moment and opportunity in time for HR and D. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Not only an opportunity, in my opinion, it's a true precipice of what does the future look like for L&D? Well, again, I'm repeating the same thing, but ChatGPT is an order taker and it makes training okay and maybe even good. It creates good training material. It doesn't follow the science of learning. It's not better than us, but sometimes good is good enough for our stakeholders. And once they figure all this out, they're going to be looking, do I need L&D? And that is a real question that we should even be asking ourselves in terms of what's the value proposition that we bring. You should be able to answer that proposition. So yes, it's an opportunity for us to truly rise to the occasion, prepare our talent for the shift that's coming because it's already happening. It's our opportunity. We've got to evolve from order takers to trusted learning advisors.
I'm seeing, for example, the skills that you needed to be a HR leader have just massively evolved, almost unrecognizable in terms of the skills that you need. What are the top skills that you feel that a CLO in this day and age needs to be successful?
Understanding concepts like strategic alignment, concepts like learning needs analysis, stakeholder engagement. But I guess if I went to just the skills perspective, strategic thinking, analytical thinking, it's our human skills, empathy,
Mm-hmm.
listening, problem solving, relationship building, curiosity, continuous learning. It's less about that transactional tactical training concept of training. It's the human side of it.
And storytelling, you mentioned earlier how important
Mm-hmm.
that is. We did our people analytics summit a few months back. We had 4,000 VPs of people analytics, and one of the insights that came out of asking all of those leaders questions around this between success and failure is the ability to actually tell the story to the stakeholders. It wasn't even about any of the technical things, any of the numbers, any of the skills. Is that how do we translate the work and tell a story that captures, like you said earlier, in terms of how you measure ROI, the storytelling piece was the most important thing. And I was like, oh wow, as a people analytics person, I didn't think that would be the most important thing. Yeah.
What's interesting is my doctoral research was on chief financial officers, and I was studying them to understand what value do they find in learning and development in the organization.
Mm.
And one of the biggest findings that I took away from that research is they want the qualitative data. They specifically were saying, stop sending me these Excel spreadsheets with your mathematical equations
Yeah,
because it's
exactly.
meaningless to me.
Yeah,
I can't actually use this. But what are the stories behind how you're impacting it?
exactly.
And by the way, don't come to me when it's budget season. That's the obvious time to build a relationship with the CFO. Do not do that. Get them off season.
That's
Don't
great
go at
advice.
them just for the budget.
So obvious,
Actually,
and everyone's going at the same time. That's terrible. Yeah,
yeah, I need a budget. Don't cut my budget. No, build it off season when it's not about the budget. I mean, we know that may be your long-term goal. But the other thing that I uncovered as well was there's been this fear that the CFO cuts the L&D budget first. And what I took away from my research is absolutely not. Any cost center is up for grabs. And they don't, at least the ones I interviewed said, I've never targeted L&D. I target any cost center. And so what I'll say is take 10% off of all the cost centers. And of course, we're in L&D, so we feel that and we think, oh my gosh,
it's just
it's
us.
just us.
HR say the
No,
same
it's
thing.
also marketing.
Yeah,
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 it's marketing, it's HR, sometimes IT. It's not just us.
yeah. It's a really random question, but like, what are some of the things that L&D leaders aren't talking about enough, but really should be?
I mean, I would repeat everything we've talked about so far, building relationships outside of the obvious ones. I don't hear anybody talking about.
Mm.
I don't hear enough people talking about how to truly solve the skills crisis. And in theory, everyone's talking about it. Oh, we need to have a skills organization and we're skills-based organization. How are you actually doing that? What keeps me up at night, I'm going to answer this a different way, is the fact that L&D is not looking at what roles may truly be impacted in the next 2 to 3 years in the organizations. And how can we be a part of the conversations and how can we start planning for that now? So I'll tell you, in my organization today, I know right now, no one's told me this, I know right now that 30% of our workforce is at risk now that we have AI because we have a ton of frontline workers that are doing the exact role that AI is going to be able to do for them. I know this right now. So it is my responsibility as a learning leader to be planning to help those individuals build the skills to either cross-train, transfer internally, or prepare them for skills externally when their jobs come to an end. I feel like too often we are reactive in this point where these decisions are made, HR someplace else, and then all of a sudden we hear there are layoffs and we're laying off X% of the company. Most likely, you knew that that was coming at some point. There were indicators, there was a runway. So I'm not hearing enough conversations about how do we drive the conversation to figure out which roles are potentially at risk and how we help that talent prepare today, rather than just laying them off and letting it be somebody else's responsibility.
I hate that when I see CEOs of those large companies jump on, the news and the media being like, "Oh, we had no idea that this was
Yeah,
coming."
you knew.
And I'm like, "Wait a minute, Mark Zuckerberg, you hired, 100,000 people or however many 30,000 people during this period, and you thought that growth was just going to continue magically forever. Like, you knew you knew exactly what was happening there. And then yeah, I love that. I love the fact you own that as well, right? And that's something you carry on yourself. You're like, my opportunity to help reskill and upskill our employees to make sure.
And it's not just me, though. I mean, every learning leader could take a step back and just look. Now, yeah, you have to understand AI a little bit. I mean, I'm not by far an AI expert, but I play with it to understand it. I'm curious about it. And so there are things that it's replaced for me in my life. I personally had a copywriter, I had an editor, and I had a marketing team creating my graphics. I don't need any of those anymore.
Yep.
ChatGPT does that. So I immediately know, okay, if I can replace people in my life, then of course in my company and elsewhere, copywriters are potentially at risk. Marketing people are at risk. Where are these activities that AI does better than us? And then look in your organization and figure out how can our organization use this? Because as I said, every leader wants to figure that out. We don't need somebody else to tell us the roles that are potentially impacted.
Yeah.
We can figure that ourselves. So figure it out and start to create a plan so that you can build skills for those individuals to either transition internally or externally.
Listen, Kim, I think we've got to leave some for the book for people to read the rest. Don't give it all away.
I need my 10%. I need that.
Yeah. So before I let you go, where can people grab a copy of the book and also follow you if they want to reach out, say hi, and connect with you? Where's the best place?
Yeah, so for the book, whatever your favorite book retailer is, Amazon is always the easiest one, but for those non-Amazonians, Barnes and Nobles, Walmart, whatever it is, it's available online. LinkedIn, I'm very, very active on LinkedIn, so please feel free to connect with me there, or my website is keithkeating.com.
Amazing, man. Well, I'm honestly super happy for you. I remember when we first spoke and this was
Thank you.
in your mind's eye and you were thinking about the book, and here we are. So really happy to see all the success you're having. And for everyone listening, as always, all of those links are going to be below. Wherever you're listening or watching, the links will all be there to make your life very easy. Listen, I wish you all the best, and I'll see you soon, all right?
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.